Judge Prescott thought he could silence Pam Bondi with a fine, but what he didn't see coming was her tearing his entire argument apart, right in front of everyone. The courthouse in Tampa, Florida, had witnessed countless legal battles, but on this particular morning, no one could have predicted the storm about to unfold. Pam Bondi, sharp as ever, strode through the heavy wooden doors, briefcase in one hand, the other adjusting the lapel of her blazer. This was supposed to be a routine hearing, something she could argue in her sleep. As she approached the defendant's table, she could already feel Judge Prescott's eyes on her. Even before he spoke, she knew something was coming. Prescott, known for his no-nonsense demeanor, wasn't looking at her face. His gaze was fixed just below her collarbone. A simple gold cross. The air in the courtroom shifted. A quiet stillness. Then, with a tone as sharp as a gavel strike, Prescott cleared his throat and leaned forward. "Miss Bondi, I must remind you, religious symbols have no place in my courtroom." Pam barely blinked. "You're wearing a cross. That violates the neutrality of this space. You'll need to remove it or face a fine." A murmur rippled through the spectators. The bailiff shifted. The clerk darted a nervous glance between the judge and Pam. Judges had tried to assert control over their courtrooms before, but finding a lawyer over a necklace? That was new. Pam didn't move. "Respectfully, Your Honor, my cross is no different than a wedding ring or a locket with a family photo inside." Prescott's face was unreadable. "That's not how I see it," he sighed, already sounding exasperated. "Either remove it, or I'll have to issue a fine for disregarding courtroom neutrality." For the first time in her career, Pam Bondi was fined, not for misconduct, not for a procedural error, but for wearing a piece of jewelry. It wasn't about the fine. It was about what it represented. She didn't take off the cross. Instead, she calmly folded her hands over her briefcase, her expression cool and unwavering. She wasn't about to let this slide. "Your Honor, before we continue, I'd like to formally address this issue." Judge Prescott raised an eyebrow. "Address it?" "Yes," Pam said firmly. "I'll be filing an objection and would like to state my argument on record." The judge smirked, glancing at the clock on the wall. "Miss Bondi, you're aware this hearing is about a business dispute, not your personal grievances?" Pam didn't flinch. "I'm also aware that the First Amendment doesn't take a recess for personal opinions." That got his attention. He leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. The court reporter's fingers hovered over her keyboard. The atmosphere had shifted, not because of the business dispute at hand, but because Pam had just openly challenged a judge's authority. She knew she was walking a thin line, but backing down? Not an option. "You're fining me for wearing a cross? Let's break that down legally, shall we?" Judge Prescott exhaled, rubbing his temples. But before he could get a word in, Pam was already reaching into her briefcase. She wasn't just going to argue. She was going to dismantle his entire premise, brick by brick. And Judge Prescott? He had no idea just how deep a hole he was digging for himself. She pulled out a single sheet of paper, placing it carefully on the table. No rush. Every movement deliberate. Every second of silence another turn of the screw, tightening the tension in the room. The judge sighed. "Miss Bondi, I don't have time for theatrics." Pam didn't blink. "Neither do I, Your Honor. But what I do have is a solid understanding of constitutional law." Prescott laced his fingers together, bracing himself. "You're being fined for wearing a cross, which violates courtroom neutrality." Pam's voice was steady. "And what legal precedent are you basing that on?" Silence. The court reporter's fingers hovered. The bailiff barely shifted. Prescott let out a slow breath. "This courtroom operates under my authority, Miss Bondi." Pam nodded. "It does. But that authority isn't above the Constitution." She tapped the paper in front of her. "And under the First Amendment, personal religious expression is protected, especially when it does not disrupt proceedings." The judge scoffed. "You're an attorney, not a law professor." Pam's smile was cool, calculated. "Then let's talk case law, shall we?" She picked up the paper. "Tinker v. Des Moines, 1969. A landmark case establishing that individuals do not shed their constitutional rights when entering a government institution, whether that's a school or a courtroom. Prescott's jaw tightened. He knew that case. Everyone in the legal field did. Pam didn't stop. West Virginia State Board of Education versus Barnett, 1943. The Supreme Court ruled that compelling individuals to remove or hide symbols of personal belief is a direct violation of the First Amendment. She set the paper down. So, Your Honor, would you like me to keep going, or would you prefer to reconsider that fine? A long pause. The judge's fingers tapped against his armrest. He was cornered, and he knew it. But his pride? That was another matter. This is not a religious debate, Miss Bondi. Pam tilted her head. Then why did you make it one? A few quiet gasps. Prescott's face darkened. Enough, he snapped, but his authority? It was slipping. Pam leaned forward. With all due respect, Your Honor, I'll stop when I hear a legal justification for this fine. Because so far, I haven't. Silence. Then finally, the judge looked at the clerk. Mark the fine as pending review. Pam smirked. I'll take that as a temporary victory. But she wasn't done. Not even close. This wasn't just about a fine anymore. It was about setting a precedent. One that Prescott and the entire legal system wouldn't forget anytime soon. And the fallout? Oh, that was only just beginning. A pause. Then Lisa's voice sharpened. Wait, he fined you over a necklace? You're kidding. Pam let out a dry chuckle. I wish I was. Lisa didn't hesitate. Tell me everything. Pam recounted the hearing in precise detail, laying out how Prescott had tried to enforce an arbitrary rule with no legal backing. She didn't embellish, she didn't have to. The facts alone were damning. By the time she finished, Lisa was already moving. This story is going live tonight. And trust me, it's not just going to be a sidebar piece. Pam smiled. That was exactly what she needed. The next morning, the firestorm begins. The moment Pam walked into her office, her assistant Lauren was waiting with wide eyes. It's everywhere, she said, handing Pam a tablet. Pam scanned the screen. The headline on a major news site read, Police Garlight Florida Judge Attempts to Fine Attorney Over Religious Symbol. Backlash Erupts Police Garlight. The article wasn't just about the hearing anymore. It was about the larger implications, judicial overreach, First Amendment rights, and whether personal beliefs were being unfairly targeted in legal spaces. Legal analysts were already weighing in and social media was on fire. Lauren flipped to another page. And Prescott? He's not happy. Pam's lips curled into a knowing smirk. Good.